This next video goes out to Professor Hebbard of the Royal Melbourne Hospital and to the staff at the Royal Melbourne Hospital. So initially when I met you, Professor Hebbard, if you go back to our first initial consultation, a junior member of staff introduced the pair of us because she felt that you would be able to help me. So she introduced us and I didn't get a good response. And it led to a situation where we had a pretty big dust-up, and I ended up doing a story in the paper about my need for a feeding tube. And so a little bit after that story went out there, you decided you would help me out and you did a feeding tube for me. That NG saved my life. Whether you knew it or not at the time, you saved my life by putting in the NG. Because for as long as I can remember, I've had issues with swallowing. I've had issues with eating that have just made my life miserable. And they didn't just start last year or 3 years ago or 10 years ago. The eating issues were there from birth. If I got a big milky stomach from mum, then I was laid down. If I laid down, I would cease breathing. So my parents knew not to ever let me get a full belly. When I got older, I would just vomit everywhere. And they used to get told, she's only a baby, she'll stop vomiting everywhere. That's what babies do. Well, what do you do when your child continuously vomits? Repeatedly. For their entire life. What do you do when they aspirate, when they can't swallow properly, and it's a lifelong issue? And nobody seems to care or take the time to do anything about it. I was a failure to thrive baby. I've had poor nutrition my entire life. So it was a blessing when you put in that feeding tube. It was the best thing. It's given me additional years of life that I would never have had. And I'd like to thank you for that. But what you did next was pretty cruel. You decided to... So when I went to you initially, I was referred to receive the G-tube. After a while, I got used to it. The G-tube was wonderful. But then I realised the aspiration was getting worse and that I was bringing stuff up even though I had a G-tube. So I was re-referred back to you and you didn't help me. You told me to have a Nissen fundoplication, which if I would have had the Nissen fundoplication, I would have died as a result of bone development, tissue destruction of the stomach, the esophagus, and the diaphragm. So I would have died if I'd have had that operation, but you were advising me to do it. You stood your ground for months while you tried to advise me to have that operation, knowing what it would do to me because you knew of my diagnosis of fibrosia, ossificational progressiva. And according to you, you'd done research on it and you're aware of the condition. So you knew that that would be the outcome. I was devastated and I fought you. And I decided, because you gave me an ultimatum, either have the Nissen fundoplication or just continue the way you are, but you're not getting a J-tube. Because I requested a J-tube, because it's what you do when the G-tube fails. You use a J-tube to overcome that so that the feed goes down into your bowel as opposed to being brought up and causing problems in your upper GI tract, such as chest infections, aspiration, choking, inhalation, that type of thing. You said no, and you held out. So I returned to my community. I was very sick. I couldn't eat or drink anything. And I was finalising my affairs in the belief that I would die because you were not stepping up. Didn't matter what I said in those consultations, you weren't not stepping up for me when I needed you the most. But that was not the worst thing you've done to me. So in the end, I had a car accident and some other awful, truly awful things happened to me because you would not provide me with a J-tube. And I just accepted it. Because what else could I do? And one day you just decided, you know what, I'll just give her the J-tube. So you gave me the J-tube. And now I've had the J-tube for a while. I've had some trouble with it, which I wanted your help for the trouble with that, but I couldn't get anywhere with you in the consultations. You just wouldn't provide the help. I tried to get a date for a J-tube change. No one would book it. None of your colleagues or anyone I spoke to at that hospital would book it. No one would book me for a J-tube change. So I knew there was something wrong because no one would book the J-tube change. And then I found out that behind my back, you went to people at the hospital and you told them things that were not true, that never happened. And you thought you were going to get away with it. You kind of did it. I can see why you did it. It was a bit of payback because I went out in the media about you and what you did to me earlier with regards to the refusing my tube. I was also getting ready to go to the media about the other issues that had happened and the fact that I wasn't able to get the care that I needed. And you knew that was coming. And you knew you were going to get named. You knew your hospital, Professor Hebbard, was going to get named, and so were you. And so I think you got mad, which you have quite a temper. You have to acknowledge that. You have quite a temper with patients, and especially me, because you don't like me telling it how it is. You want me to have whatever you want, despite the outcome for my body, whether that's death or destruction. You don't care. You just wanted what you wanted. And so you got mad. You went and reported some things to the hospital that never happened, and some things that happened but not how you portrayed them. And you then found a situation, then I found a situation to where all of a sudden I received no feed and no supplies for my feeding tube. So there was no giving sets, no containers, no nothing. And they're normally pretty regular. I never got any of that. No one would book the J-tube change that I needed. And so I knew there was something wrong. And I called up, tried to work out what was happening, what the situation was. No one would talk to me. Absolutely no one would talk to me. Then somebody makes contact with my GP and says, Professor Hebbard's made some claims. We're not providing any service, period. This patient's not getting anything from us. We don't care whether she passes away as a result of that decision. We think that's in her best interest to pass away as a result of something that he's reported. Never mind that it didn't really happen that way. Never mind that he's just beating it up to get back at me as revenge. Never mind any of that. All right, because that's what it's really all about. Covering up that he didn't read the reports properly, covering up that he didn't speak to the world expert of fibrosia, ossification, or progressiva, covering it all up. I get that. So anyway, my GP tried to get me into another doctor, and he tried every avenue that's possible to get me into another doctor to get my J-tube changed and to reinstate my supplies for my feeding tube. And we've discovered that no doctor will take me on. They agree to take me on until Professor Hebbard speaks to them or his report is read, and then they literally refuse to provide me any service and discharge me from their clinics. So I've been blacklisted as a result of you, Professor Hebbard, and I am going to die as a result of that. And I'm very upset about it. And I don't like that. I think that's abominable to have that lower level of duty of care. Like, whatever happened to your duty of care as a doctor, to be honest and do the right thing and save a patient. You've obviously got no duty of care. You don't really care at all, because if you did, you would not be leaving me to die right now. I don't have very long to live. You see this? This is my swelled up hand. Alright? That's because of damage. I have actual organ damage now because of you, because of your withholding of my feeding tube supplies and my needs. And you knew when you maliciously went to the hospital and did that, that would be the outcome. That was the design, was to I'm gonna die. And I am very upset because you tricked me into thinking you were a decent person, you were a decent doctor, and you would do the right thing. You made me feel like you would do the right thing. I now know that you won't, and that you're not trustworthy. and you've terrified me. As a result, I just feel like, what are you doing, Professor Hebbard? Why are you ending me over something that isn't real? You should go and admit that. Just, go and admit it. That you weren't honest and reinstate everything. We can all go home happy then. Just go and admit that you weren't honest and that you didn't do the right thing. And get my services for my feeding tube reinstated. Get me reinstated at the Royal Melbourne. Preferably as soon as possible before I die. I'm being left to die by the Royal Melbourne, who feels they have no duty of care, and you certainly don't have a duty of care, apparently. You can just leave people to die. I just don't know what to say. The other night, because of the aspiration, because I've got no working proper tube, and no one's changing it or giving me any supplies, I have to eat a bit or drink a bit to live. Just to live, mate. Not to do anything else, just to live. And what that means for me is I choke and I aspirate and I feel like I'm drowning and being waterboarded by the CIA, and I can't stop it. And you can. At any time you could stop it by fixing what you told the hospital and reinstating my supplies. I'm here dying and you're at fault for that. Okay? Don't walk away from this, Professor Hebbard. Okay? I know that you're angry and that you are hurt. But when you do the wrong thing, sometimes patients need to speak out and not just go home and die silently. Okay? Sometimes they need to speak up about you, the hospital, and the way that they have been treated. I don't really care anymore. I have but a few weeks to live, Professor Hebbard. Hear that? That's me choking, okay? The other night I choked so bad that for over 35 minutes I wasn't breathing properly. And it's affected my throat quite severely. And these choking episodes have gone on for a lifetime, but they're becoming dangerous, more close together. They're being longer episodes. We're concerned about possible brain damage as a result of not being able to breathe properly because I'm choking and can't get my breath on any kind of liquids or solids or just anything that I get. If it's not through the J tube, I'm in trouble. And you know that about me, right? You knew that your decision with the hospital to do what you did, you knew when you took that decision, you were ending my life. How do you have a clear conscience, Professor Hebbard? Because you really should not. I've been told that you're retiring. I don't know if that's true because I hear so many lies from the hospital. I have no idea what's true anymore. What I know is what I've experienced with you and the hospital I know is true. But if you're retiring, yep, I can see why you would do that. Kill me and run away. Yep, that's a really nice person, isn't it? Wipe me out because of no feeding tube. This is what I'd like to say to you. Before you retire, Professor Hebbard, these are the things I want from you. An apology. Number 2, I want my feeding tube supplies reinstated. Number 3, I want my tube changed. Number 4, I think you need to have a round table with me because you've told me you've read stuff about fibrosia, ossification, or progressiva that really isn't true. And we need to discuss that because you've made decisions that will cost me my life as a result. For example, telling me to have Nissen fundoplication, it's not an option for me. You put a J tube in, but the way that my J tube has been put in is of concern, given that I have fibrosia, or ossification, or progressiva. That needs to be rectified. I can't, no nurse or nobody can help me. It has to be done in surgery under anaesthetic in a hospital with proper professionals doing it. And we need that urgently done because I am in the process, like I say, of dying. You have not been appraised by my GP or anybody else of how bad it really actually is at the moment for me, and has been for over a year. Well, you played games, and you know, like you said to my GP, yeah, now that I've told him that, they won't allow me to ever treat her again. So you knew when you come out with that baloney story, you knew the side effects and the consequences that would happen for me, but yet you still did it. My GP he's beside himself because he's got a patient who's going to die, and it was completely preventable. It never needed to happen. All I need is a feeding tube, and I can go on for many years. But without that tube, without the feeding tube, I'm going to die. I'm being left to die by you, and I'm very upset about it. And don't tell me it shouldn't affect me. I should be so proud that this has happened to me, and I should go with dignity. Why should I? Why shouldn't I tell the world what you did to me, what the hospital did to me? You blacklisted me, and you lied to blacklist me. And you've blacklisted me the entire state wide, so I have no other doctor to go to for help, because you got a little bit angry over an article that was printed some years ago when me and you had a disagreement, and I went to the media. I mean, what can I say? You know? You got angry because my body doesn't work the way that you want it to do. Well, that's how it is for a disabled person. Sometimes they can't force their body to work the way that you want. Okay, sometimes when a person is disabled, they're going to decline. One thing that we know about fibrosia, ossification, or progressiva is that people tend to decline over the time. It's called progressiva, like there is progressiva in the name, because it's progress. You progress. Okay, is that not a clue? So you're getting angry at me because you put the G-tube in and I didn't stay the same. Well, what do you expect? It's called fibrosia, ossification, or progressiva because, quote, you progress, you get worse. This was always going to happen. If you read the handbook, one day this was going to happen to me. But what I didn't expect is to be left for dead by you and the Royal Melbourne. It is heartbreaking what I have been through. You know, I'm getting ready to die. I'm finalising my affairs. I have weeks to live. And at any time, you could have saved me. My GP has been calling you for months. We're how far into the year? And you haven't done anything to help. How about retracting your comments? How about a written retraction since it isn't true? How about putting it on the record? How about doing something nice for me as a human being? You know, I'm upset that you're retiring and having a good life when you certainly haven't earned it with regards to how you've treated me. And yes, I am going to tell people, Professor Hebbard from the Royal Melbourne. Yes, I will use your image. Yes, this is going to happen to you because of what you did to me. If you would have done it the right way and the nice things for me, that's a whole different matter. But because you are killing me, I have no choice. It's that simple. I'm not going to sit back while you do this to me. And I have had staff say to me, if I speak out, one particular staff member of the Royal Melbourne Hospital, she pointed out to me, if I speak out, if I name names, if I talk about this in any context anywhere and it turns up, I am going to get sued and taken to the cleaners. Well, that's okay. Here's the problem with that. So I'll just explain it to you. Number one, I have no assets. So what are you going to get from me? Number two, based on my medical situation currently, I only have a few weeks to live. So I don't know where you're going to get these millions of dollars from me personally, because it's just not going to happen. So the threat of a lawsuit doesn't really worry me. Okay, it's when you're dying, and I know you can't understand this, people that are not in the process of dying or have a few weeks to live, you can't understand. But when you only have a few weeks to live, you soon become very much like, your world changes, your worldview changes, the way you see things, it changes. It's not very, there's no way to explain it. And it really doesn't bother me anymore. The other thing is, I think this is kind of mental abuse and torture to take away someone's lifeline of a feeding tube that they require to live and refuse to provide it is a lack of duty of care lack of human rights, and it is abuse. You're abusing me by taking away my only ability to survive, which is a feeding tube, and to live each day. And do you think that's okay? It's not. Abusing my human rights is not okay. We need to stamp out this kind of abuse in the medical world. It needs some treatment, and the doctor looks at your haircut and goes, I don't like that person's haircut, and then you don't get your treatment. We need some rules in place to prevent these kinds of things from happening. And right now in Australia, there are no rules. Doctors are the law. They can do exactly as they like. And he was just flexing his muscles and exercising that, Professor Hebbard was, just to teach me a lesson because of that earlier article, which is on my YouTube channel. It's in a short. Go and look at it. You can see for yourself. It's one of the shorts. There's the earlier article from 2019 where Professor cut off my tube and we had a problem then. Now we've got it again in 2025. I was having such a good life until then. But yeah, out of respect for me, Professor Hebbard, out of respect for who I am, what you have done to me, the craziness that you brought into my world, give me a call. It's an emergency. You probably got about 2 weeks to act before some ungodly thing happens to me, because based on the doctor that I've just seen, I don't have long. So I would say, Professor Hebbard, give me a call. Reverse the situation swiftly. Start telling the truth and do the right thing. Reinstate my feeding tube and do something about my not working J tube, because I am in real trouble. I have now got organ damage, which is, it's all your fault. It's all your fault. And I'm sick of the damage that you're doing to me, mentally and physically. I want it all stopped. Right? Because it's not okay.